massive demonstration of honor and support for President Muhammadu Buhari as he joined other leaders for Nigeria Republic's Day celebration.
Nigeria partners the United Kingdom set to investigate properties worth more than £1 billion in the fight against corruption.
Nigerian police force set for more synergy with key security players in its deployment strategy towards 2019 general elections.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on the call to return to the parliamentary system of government.
Now, if we remember, last Thursday, the House of Representatives passed for first reading a bill seeking to return Nigeria to parliamentary system of government, as initiated by 22 House of Representatives members.
Well, Ruth, the bill is getting support from members of the House from the different geopolitical zones, and of course the support also cuts across party lines. So far, about 71 out of the 360 members are pushing for Nigeria to jettison the presidential system of government and revert to the parliamentary system.
Also, Kinsley, one of the reasons they advanced include the high cost of running the current system of government, which, according to the members, is responsible for the slow pace of development and growth across Nigeria.
Quite rightly so, Ruth. Now there is talk about Nigeria running the most expensive democracy in the world on account of its practice of the presidential system of government.
Also, another reason they passed on was the over-centralization of government, which has been said to have obstructed effective and speedy service delivery while pampering the huge bureaucracy and government structure.
Well, different people have taken different positions on the proposition, especially as the parliamentary system of government was practiced in Nigeria from independence in 1960 until 1966, before it was brought to an abrupt end following the first military coup of the 15th of January in 1966.
Well, Kinsley, this development no doubt has raised a lot of questions on why this debate should even come up in the first place. Now, some think the problem with the presidential system of government is not the system itself, but the people running it.
Well, such questions that are begging for answers will include: why are the lawmakers advocating for a reversal of the system of government in Nigeria at this time? What are their intentions and what difference will it make? And of course, what are the possible implications if Nigeria were to return to a parliamentary system of government?
Well, these are some of the questions guests will attempt to answer as we discuss the proposed return to the parliamentary system of governance this morning on the program. I am Ruth Aguwele. Thank you so much for joining us. It is Good Morning Nigeria, coming to you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo on a foggy morning here in Nigeria's capital territory. I also join my colleague Ruth in welcoming you to this edition of the program, in the course of which we have our complementary segments, among which are Newspaper Review, Business Sports, and others. But first, let's take the highlights of the morning news with Musbah Udan Wahab. Morning, Musbah.
Hello, Kinsley. Good morning. And Ruth, good morning as well. Welcome to the news. It was a massive demonstration of honor and support and respect for President Muhammadu Buhari in Zindaro as he joined other leaders in the sub-region of the Republic's Day celebrations in the neighboring Niger. The heads of state and government in attendance celebrated the Nigerian leader at 76.
Quite impressive. They have displayed a lot of efficiency in management of resources.
Very much like us, culturally, ethnically, and in terms of history, we have a lot in common. With the meager resources that they have done a lot to improve their country.
Nigeria is collaborating with the United Kingdom to investigate properties worth more than £1 billion alleged to have been acquired by Nigeria's politicians and government executives in the UK. Chairman of a special presidential investigation panel for the recovery of public property, Okoye Obono Obla, stated this while briefing newsmen on the progress made so far by the panel. Nigeria's Foreign Affairs Minister Geoffrey Onyema says Nigeria will support the implementation of a programs of a D8 Organization for Economic Cooperation, which can help Nigeria industrialize and improve its infrastructure. The minister said this when he received the Secretary General of the D8, Ambassador Kafar Kushari, in Abuja.
We are very happy with Nigeria for the commitment. You know, I can say this, that whenever it comes to initiative, when it comes to commitment, Nigeria can be among the top that will give their support to us.
We need to think outside the box. We need to come up with new ideas, because the tried and the tested and the old ideas, you know, we can see that there are a lot of constraints. It's not getting us the development that we want as quickly as we want.
Meanwhile, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed also granted audience to the Secretary General of the D8 nations, restating the federal government's commitments to ensuring that the tourism sector takes a vantage position in the nation's revenue-generating platform.
It's on record that this government has, in the last 2 years alone, 2016-2017, invested massively in infrastructure. We've invested 2.7 trillion naira in 2 years alone in infrastructure, in roads, in bridges, in railways, in power.
So the opportunity is so much for us. I think we need to build all the foundation, the platform. We have to work hard. We have to be committed in what we do. And I look at this area as very important.
The House of Representatives, in accordance with House rules, moved and adopted a motion to admit President Muhammadu Buhari into the Green Chambers for the presentation of a 2019 appropriation bill. The House leader, Femi Gbajabiamila, made a motion and moved the motion at Tuesday's plenary.
Public be admitted into chambers tomorrow.
A motion to bring in Mr. President to submit budget tomorrow has been passed. That shows patriotism.
And similarly, the Senate is ready to receive the 2019 appropriation bill from President Muhammadu Buhari today. The legislators at plenary approved the request by Mr. President for the visit.
At 11 a.m. on the 2019 appropriation bill, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
The Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution is considering the possibility of establishing a National Peace Advisory Forum in order to further tackle all forms of insecurities that impede development and contribute to circles of violence. At the moment, the Institute is engaging key stakeholders on discussions to fast-track the initiative. Participating partners believe that the collaborative approach is necessary to regularly identify and respond to emerging threats to peace. Policy recommendation is expected at the end of the Technical Steering Committee inaugural meeting. The Nigerian police force says it is open to more synergy with security agencies and key players in the electoral process, as experiences gathered in recent elections are meaningful guides to its deployment strategy in the 2019 general elections. Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris reaffirmed this at the Nigeria Police Security Summit in Abuja.
Adequate security for the 2019 general elections to ensure violent-free election.
It is imperative to review the template for the 2019 general election in order to reassure Nigerians and the international community of our commitment to credible election.
That's it is for now. More details will come your way in the course of the day. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll continue with Ruth and Kinsley after the break.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem promptly through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime, we bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Akpotego Isakwobeje. I'm from Delta State Company. At that 2005, the company was privatized. Those that were working, that were caught up with the privatization, were laid off. No arrangement for the payment of anything. They were denied their pension rights. So in 2005 through 2017, we have been struggling how we can be put back on pension. We staged a lot of demonstrations, under the rain, under the sun. The government did not listen. The marginalization for the past 13 good years by successive administration, the sufferings we'll be going through, the loss of human dignity and no hope for livelihood. July 31st, 2018, the monthly pensions start coming to the pensioners. We also want to be very, very thankful to President Muhammadu Buhari. He's God sent.
Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1, a delicious combination of rich cocoa and wholesome goodness of milk. Just add hot water to get an instant chocolatey treat that delights your senses. Cadbury Hot Chocolate 3-in-1. Just add hot water.
It's okay, I'm okay.
What happened?
It's just a little scratch, Mom. How can I play with bigger boys if I'm afraid of little scratches, right?
What comforts a mother most is to see her child growing up. Of course. But I know that as he learns to be brave, he'll face even more germs and the risk of infection.
That's why you need Dettol protection, because Dettol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
You in the air-conditioned office with the itchy throat. Strepsils. Girl in the spotlight with the raspy throat. Strepsils. You in the pollution. It's you. Dry throat. Strepsils. Hello in the downpour with the scratchy throat. Take Strepsils. Strepsils, with its soothing medicinal ingredients, will heal the harm done to your throat from external factors. Strepsils. Strepsils. Strepsils, for a dry, itchy, raspy, scratchy throat.
Welcome back. Now to business news. Local manufacturers tax to improve on finished products as Nigeria Export-Import Bank seeks collaboration to establish shipping link within West and Central African regions. Let's now join Kunle Adeyeye for details on Business News.
Nigerian manufacturers have been advised to engage in the production of finished goods for exports, as this is a sure way to gain acceptance among other countries and foster good regional trading among other African countries. The Executive Director, Nigeria Export Promotion Council, Olusegun Awolowo, noted that one of the ways to encourage intra-African trade is by leveraging on technology to market Nigerian products to the world. He challenged manufacturers to key into the presidential MSMEs clinic as it will afford them an opportunity to interface with key industry regulators to further upscale production of finished goods in the country.
Companies that are good looking up to scale up, we push them towards that. They can borrow money at a very low rate, and then the money is available.
In recognition of the challenges faced by African businesses in engaging in regional trade, the Nigerian Export-Import Bank, in collaboration with the West African Chamber of Commerce, Trade and Investment, have perfected plans to establish a shipping link within the region and Central African to ease trade barriers. The Managing Director of Nexim, Abba Bello, was speaking against the backdrop of the just concluded intra-African trade fair in Cairo, Egypt.
Use of Barrow, Ajaokuta Jetty, as well as Ikorodu, to move exportable goods that will go on sailing through there. That's why we need badges. Okay. We've also gone very far with NIWA on charting the waters where we need to dredge to create a channel.
And next is the graphic representation of Tuesday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With Business News, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
All right, thank you very much, Kunle Adeyeye, for the business package. Newspaper review is next for us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for staying with us, and Bayo Atoyebi is already seated for our newspaper review. Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, Bayo, good to see you. The story that is on the front pages of the papers that we have this morning, three of the papers that we have, is the lead story. Let's begin with the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper has it as a double-decker headline along with photographs. It says, ex-Chief of Defense Staff Alex Bade murdered. Ex-Chief of Defense Staff Alex Bade murdered. That story is in greater detail on page 3. You can see the two photographs that we have there. Is Alex Bade while he was still in service to the left, and then to the right is the car in which he was shot dead yesterday evening. That incident took place on the Abuja Kefi Expressway. For the New Telegraph newspaper, it's also the lead story, as I indicated, and the headline with a double-decker one, it's ex-Chief of Defense Staff Alex Bade shot dead, attacked while returning from Abuja farm, and with a rider Air Force, he died of gunshot wounds. Details can be found on page 5. You can see the photograph of the late Alex Bade, while again he was still in service. Ruth, let's take stories from you as well.
Okay, before we get to Bio. All right, I'm taking the Sun first, and just beside the main flag, 487.8 billion naira refund to states. Buhari accuses NAS of padding. Claims lawmakers inserted 890.5 million naira gives conditions for disbursements. Senate keeps mum. You'll find that story on page 8. And just below that, the Sun Award will spur me to do more. That's Governor Dixon, and the story you find on page 6. And the leading story is on 2019 polls. INEC raises fears over security. U.S. calls for violence-free polls. That story is on page 9. And let's come beside the picture here. 2019 budget presentation. Senate House awaits Buhari. 40 reps hold plenary, adopt motion to allow President present budget at joint session. You find that story on page 6. We've seen that story of the ex-chief of defense staff trending in all the papers. Kinsley has already read that, so I'll skip it. Let's come down. Atiku dismisses Buhari's promise for credible elections, accuses president of persecuting, intimidating opponents. That story is on page 8. And that's the outlook for the Sun. Should I take one more before we get to you? Or? Okay. Just below the masthead, this one is Daily Trust, sorry. DSS police take over National Assembly as Buhari presents budget today. And you find that story on page 3. Trending, the death of the ex-chief of defense staff. That's the leading story here. Let's come beside the picture here. CBN, NNPC, others to be captured in national budget soon. DG budget. The story is on page 17. SDP state chairman aligned with Duke wants Ghana's candidature upturned. The story is on page 13. FG bans us from traveling on newspaper pages. Find out who is saying that on page 7. 864 IDPs return home in Benue, Nasarawa, Taraba. And the story is on page 4. And the last read here, Nigeria to host D8 Health Social Protection Program. You find that story on page 3. Bayo?
Yes. The whole nation is shocked to hear about the news of the death of Air Chief Marshal Alex Sabundu Bande. He was shot dead while coming from his farm along Kefi Abuja Highway. A statement from the Director of Public Relations of the Nigerian Air Force says he died from gunshot wounds sustained when his vehicle was attacked while returning from his farm. He was rushed to a hospital at Abuja Barracks where he was pronounced dead. But there have been conflicting reports about the circumstances. One paper says the former chief of defense staff was said to have been waylaid at a village called Gitata along Kefi Abuja Road. One report says he was without a military escort as expected of officers of his rank because he went to his farm. One other report said he and his driver were shot. Another says he was with his security details, and when gunmen opened fire, the aides engaged the assailants in gunfire, but eventually he was killed while some of the aides were badly wounded. He was age 61 and he was a member of the NDA Course 21. He graduated in July of 1979. He was a pilot and he held several positions. In fact, he was trained severally abroad. He was one time commander of the Presidential Fleet, and he was also Chief of Air Staff before he became Chief of Defense Staff. It's very sad. Coming just on Abuja-Kefi Highway here.
Yeah, that's a very busy highway, by the way, between Abuja and Kefi. Kefi is in Nasarawa State. I mean, for those who do not know the geography very well, it's a very busy route. So the time of the incident is not been exactly stated. They say it was in the evening, but the photographs that we have seen published as well as the social media showing that probably it was a night scene. But whatever it was, it's a puzzling development. It doesn't appear from the facts of the matter so far to have been a robbery incident. Apparently nothing was taken from the occupants of the vehicle. So if it was targeted, then who might have been responsible? And I think it's for the former chief of defense staff, yes, administratively head of the military. I mean, it's next in rank to the commander-in-chief, yes, in terms of dealing with that. He had also been as a CDS, he was a service chief, now supervising the other service chiefs. He was head of the Air Force. And this is very significant. I mean, the people will begin to ask questions if this could happen to a retired chief of defense staff. What happens to ordinary citizens? Yes, it's a pretty sad development. We do hope, we have seen instances in the past, of course, when the security and intelligence services, swung into action and immediately, and then got to the root of the matter.
This time around.
This time around.
The two chambers of the National Assembly held plenary yesterday, and they resolved to receive President Muhammadu Buhari at a joint session today. He is to lay before them the 2019 budget. Security agents comprising Brigade of Guards, the Nigerian Police, the Department of State Services, and the Nigeria Civil Defense Corps took over the entire National Assembly to ensure law and order. Members of the Parliamentary Staff Association, who had declared a 4-day warning strike and had asked their members to stay at home, were actually on Monday playing football in front of the National Assembly and deliberately precluded anybody from accessing the National Assembly. More to that, they even switched off and demobilized electricity supply and water supply to the National Assembly. The clerk of the National Assembly, Alhaji Sani Omolori, says he mandated the security to maintain law and order. They must enforce the law that allows striking workers to down tools if they choose, and also, importantly, not to restrain them from disturbing those who choose to work. And the National Assembly members, particularly members who have been elected, should be able to carry out their duty of working for the members who elected them. The two chambers resolved to receive President at 11 a.m. today. A call for boycott by the coalition of united political parties have been adjudged as most unpatriotic. On the second talk, they have also called to withdraw that. It's sad that sometimes when national issues occur, partisan considerations are taken into account, and everybody jumps to say, kind of pull him down kind of syndrome. Right. This is a national budget and people are calling for boycotts. Even the idea that some legislators were offended because of information attributed to the minister in charge of national planning had been clarified, and the members have been satisfied. And for information, you don't require a quorum for budget presentation. So why all these things? We take our partisan consideration into the extremes.
Yeah, it would appear, though, that the National Assembly would have its joint sitting today to receive the president while he tables before the lawmakers the appropriation bill for 2019. The stories, of course, have different shades. As from the New Telegraph, at the foot of the front page of the New Telegraph newspaper, it says security operatives cordon off National Assembly complex as Buhari presents 8.7 trillion naira budget today. But another story there says President rejects 488.7 billion naira National Assembly approval for states. That's a different story. But the one of the National Assembly is there. It's also there on the front page, right at the foot of the front page of the Punch newspaper. It says, blame DSS, that's Department of State Services and Police, if President can't present budget today, National Assembly. So the presumption would be, if we also had it on our news bulletin this morning, that the President, of course, will be available to present his budget. And we do hope that there will be a safe passage for all of that to happen. The Assembly staff themselves have said that they are willing to receive the President. Perhaps thereafter they could take other things. Let me read other headlines from the New Telegraph. Above the nameplate of New Telegraph newspaper, above the nameplate, federal government laments poor returns on 40 trillion naira investment in enterprises. With the rider, PPPROA, NPA and others owe government 2.7 trillion naira operating surplus. And 5 civil servants suspended over 200 million naira tax fraud. And below the name flag of the New Telegraph, you have this other headline. U.S. We expect 2019 polls to be Nigeria's best, page 4. On page 5, EFCC arraigns NBA President Usoro for alleged 1.4 billion naira fraud. And pirates seize 11 crew members from container vessel off Nigeria's coast. And page 5, APC resolves to suspend Imo and Ogun executives. And very quickly, the front page of the Punch newspaper, above the nameplates of the Punch newspaper, you have the headline, BPE yet to repay 112 billion naira loan incurred on Nitel transaction. And projects, Buhari accuses National Assembly of increasing debts payable to states. That's page 3. Nigeria can pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. That's Oshomole, APC chairman. And the story is also there about APC dissolving the state, local government and ward executives in Imo and Ogun. And back again at the foot of the front page of the Punch, just below the two photographs there, federal government has released 50% constituency allowance to lawmakers. That story is attributed to the Secretary of the Government of the Federation on page 41. Mourinho's sacking divides Man U fans in Nigeria, page 47. I hope they are not crying more than the bereaved. And on page 3, it says Obasanjo and Jega caution Nigeria and others about use of ICT for elections. Bayo.
Yes, former governor of Edo State, who has been a governor and knows where the shoe pinches when it comes to wages, and also being a frontline labor leader, says that when it comes to wages, his sympathy is always with workers. And he said, as a product of labor, he will never stand against the interests of Nigerian workers when it comes to wage. And he poses a very strong argument. He said, if governors can be made to receive same salary, irrespective of the revenue base, then there was no reason why wages of workers should not be the same across the country. And so he lended his voice to payment of the national minimum wage. Talking about the story that Ruth read earlier on, a forum of some state chairman of the Social Democratic Party, SDP, said that the ruling of an Abuja Federal High Court that Professor Jerry Gana should become the SDP presidential candidate is a misinterpretation of the SDP constitution. The party primaries, Dr. Donald Duke scored 812 to Professor Jerry Gana's 611 votes. Professor Gana challenged the emergence of Mr. Duke as chairman as a violation of Section 15.3 of the STB Constitution. And that section is rotation and zoning. It says the office of the president and national chairman of the party shall rotate between south and north and among the 6 geopolitical zones. So the chairman of 6 states said they elected a presidential candidate. And they say the implication of the court ruling is that Professor Jerry Gana will be sworn in as president on May 29. We elected a presidential candidate and not a president. Mr. Donald Duke has also indicated he will appeal. The SDP says the 2 candidates are eminently qualified and the party is neutral to the contest.
All right, Bayo, let's take our editorial this morning coming from Daily Trust newspaper at page 45. Now that prisoners can vote, that's the title of the editorial. The editorial begins by saying that the Court of Appeal Benin Division last week ruled that Nigerian prisoners have a right to vote in an election, and the ruling was granted in favor of the prayers by 5 inmates to provide for all prisoners in Nigeria to be enlisted in the voters register and given full opportunity to vote in the forthcoming elections. The judgment, the paper reminds us, affirmed an earlier 2014 decision that prisoners in Nigeria could vote in an election. The editorial adds that a useful way to start is to begin to educate prison inmates on the various processes involved in making them participate actively, and that unless the ruling is overturned by the Supreme Court, prisoners in Nigeria must henceforth be able to exercise their vote. But that this, however, cannot be done in the 2019 elections because the processes are already advanced.
Well, there are 2 implications for this. One is that if there are some prisoners whose names are already on the voters register, whose continuous registration has closed, then they are eligible to vote. Otherwise, they will probably have to wait for another election time. But the implication of the ruling, which was first passed by a High Court in 2014 and now has been confirmed by the Court of Appeal, except it is turned by the Supreme Court, becomes the order. And in future, it means that INEC must put up with the logistics of providing registration facilities and also polling facilities across the prison in the nation. But it also raises a question, which rights of prisoners do they forfeit when they are incarcerated? So those are is it part of the right to vote is also affected when you are a prisoner? Because when you are in prison, you forfeit some of your fundamental human rights. Does that include the right to vote and be voted for?
Well, not to be voted for, but the right to vote has always been a contentious point in some jurisdictions, whether prisoners have the right to vote. And in this case, the Nigerian judiciary has aligned with what would appear to be a progressive viewpoint that prisoners should have the right to vote. What is probably niggling in all of this will be, okay, in which of the elections can prisoners vote? Is INEC, are they going to vote in council elections for state conducted by the State Independent Electoral Commissions. Now, prisoners also come from different parts of the country. If they cast their ballot for a House of Assembly election, how would they vote? I mean, it will involve some cost. So you are going to have to transfer the results of their voting to the tally that you have in the state for the particular constituency, for the governorship, for the House of Reps, for the Senate. For the presidency, it's a lot easier to say, okay, this is the nation is one constituency, but in which of the elections would they be able to vote? We have to also worry about the cost. But as you rightly said, Bayo, if their names are not on the voters' register, then they are not eligible, to vote.
Aside from that, the right to vote is always goes along with the right to be voted for. Well, are you saying, therefore, when you are incarcerated, the right to be voted for is taken away from you?
No. You can put yourself forward. If a political party decides to put your name forward for election, then it's up to you. Incarceration, depending, of course, on the nature of the offense. If it is for fraud, then of course then you are barred from voting. But if it's a minor offense and you're already in jail for a few months, you can't. Some prisoners have been voted for in the past in some jurisdictions.
And some contestants have come from prison to win elections. Anyway.
Bayo, you're right. Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, the baddest story, it's a dump now on most of the stories that we read this morning. Bayo, thanks a lot for being with us.
Thanks for having me, as always.
Thank you.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be talking politics, but this time it has to do with the system of government, parliamentary or presidential.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
In line with the vision of promoting probity, accountability and transparency in the management of public funds, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation has unveiled Compendium on Fiscal Rectitude in Government Revenue and Expenditure.
The Treasury Journal that we've recently launched dwells largely on the operations of the Treasury, and in particular, the reform initiatives that we drive as the Treasury, namely the Treasury Single Account, the IPSAS implementation, the IPPS, and a host of others.
Very incisive and educating. Grab a copy of the Treasury Journal from your vendor and get abreast with financial transactions such as monthly allocations within the federal, states, and local governments, Buhari's transformation policy on the Treasury, inroads to IGR, and many more mixed grilling stories. Remember, the Treasury Journal is a dependable ally for researchers, financial institutions, the academia, and policymakers. Treasury Journal, a fiscal rectitude in managing public funds.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
You in the air-conditioned office with the itchy throat, Strepsils. Girl in the spotlight with a raspy throat, Strepsils. You in the pollution, it's you, dry throat, Strepsils. Hello in the downpour with the scratchy throat, take Strepsils. Strepsils, with its soothing medicinal ingredients, will heal the harm done to your throat from external factors. Strepsils! Strepsils! Strepsils, for a dry, itchy, raspy, scratchy throat.
Madam. Brought us as usual. As usual. For the three. You are welcome, sir. As usual, yeah? You take that one. Yeah, take that one. You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobu to come to chocolate rice made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
How they are cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back now to set the pace running for our discussion this morning on the proposed return to parliamentary system of governance. Mohammed Natala has this backgrounder.
Barely a week ago, 71 lawmakers pushed for the bill to return Nigeria to parliamentary system, seeking the amendment of the 1999 constitution. The lawmakers stated clearly their position in this legislation that points to having seamless advantages of a parliamentary system of government towards economic growth and development. Proponents of the bill are of the view that countries run by a presidential system consistently produce lower output growth, higher and more volatile inflation and greater income inequality when compared to those under a parliamentary system. In the parliamentary system, the head of state is called the Prime Minister and the legislature is the source of power for the executive. Stating such examples of Britain, France and Australia as countries rated with high productivity in their practice of the parliamentary system. Buttressing also that at the time when Nigeria was practicing it in the 60s, reports show considerable progress made in terms of economic growth and development in every ramification. The presidential system of government, however, was introduced under the military dispensation in 1979 till date, which observers believed has not improved the Nigerian economy and placing the country at a befitting position among Committee of Nations. What are the possible opportunities under the parliamentary system of government? Will the ideology resolve Nigeria's institutional and structural challenges in the coming years of our democratic journey? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be providing answers shortly.
Natala, thank you very much. Of course, we already have guests in the studios here with us, as well as at our Kaduna Network Center, to provide further insight into the move to return Nigeria to a parliamentary system of government. The features of the two systems of government will be discussed at the beginning of this conversation. Let us now welcome two members of the House of Representatives who are here with us in the studios. First, Honorable Mohammed Tahir Manguno is Chairman of the House Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development. Honorable Manguno, thanks for being with us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
Of course, he's from Borno State. Also here with us in the studios is Honorable Sergius Ose Ogun. He's representing East and Northeast and Southeast of Edo State. Honorable Sergius Ogun, pleasure to have you with us on the program again this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Also joining us in the studio is Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu. He's a researcher and public affairs analyst. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. And also joining us is Professor Sam Egu. He's from INEC Rec and Political. He's an INEC Rec and Political scientist here in our Abuja studio. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
Also, we have on the program Moses Tedeke, Professor of Political Science and Political Economy, Department of Political Science and Defense Studies from Nigerian Defense Academy in Kaduna. He's there in our Kaduna Center. Good morning. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
All right, gentlemen, once again, pleasure to have you join us. Professor Sam Egu, of course, who is a resident electoral commissioner of INEC in Niger State, has been a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria even before his current national assignment. Let's begin from a conceptual point of view. What is a parliamentary system of government and what is a presidential system of government? Perhaps we'll begin with the teachers who are in our midst. Professor Sam Egu.
Well, basically, a presidential system of government is designed around the principle or the doctrine of separation of powers, which recognizes that even though there is no watertight compartment between the three branches of government, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, each one should exercise power in a particular sphere so as to ensure mutual checks and balances in the exercise of power. A parliamentary system, on the other hand, is designed around the supremacy of parliaments. And therefore, the legislature is the primary unit of governance where elections are conducted into the legislature, and the party that produces the majority in the legislature then produces the prime minister, and that is the whole basis of the prime minister being the head of government. And then you have another level. In many systems, it can be a monarchy, it can be a president that doesn't have executive power, and there are so many designs, you know, around the world. Well, basically, the assumption is that where you have clear separation of powers, it is a bit difficult. The temptation to abuse power is much more reduced, you know. And the philosophical basis of that has been there right from the 19th century. You know, French thinkers like Montesquieu and others, you know, have said so. Now, in the case of parliamentary, in Britain, for example, it's a natural evolution. But in many other countries that were products of British colonial, you know, rule, they had their own design, you know, but basically election is conducted into parliament. And it is the cabinet, you know, the cabinet therefore is a product of parliament. And in many respects, it's accountable to the parliament. So the excess is associated with the executive. In the presidential system, it's not there in the parliamentary system. And I think that is a major attraction for so many people. And if you look at the way in which the two systems are set up, more often than not, there is tendency for power to become highly personalized in presidential system. There's a tendency for the president to exercise excessive power, you know, to the detriment of the other branches of government. And in fact, in the literature, there is what they call the perils of presidentialism. And we have seen that happen, especially in many Latin American countries. But each time people set up a narrative of difference between the two, they fail to forget other critical factors, you know, because it is not necessarily the structure of presidentialism or parliamentary that determines the form of governance. People need to also talk about political culture. People need to talk about the level of development of the party system. There are so many factors that intervene between being presidential and then leading to improved governance, or being parliamentary and leading to improved governance.
All right, Professor Sam Egu, thank you very much for your opening salvo. Let's also return to our Kaduna Network Center, where we earlier introduced Professor Moses Tedheke. Professor Tedheke, let's get your own conceptual shot at parliamentary and presidential systems of government.
Good morning, Nigerians. The presidential system of government, the president is elected. The whole country is a constituency of the president who is elected. But there are some variances of the presidential system of government, like the one of France. And then the parliamentary system of government, the people elect people, that's the electorate elect people into parliament. And from parliament, a leader is chosen as the prime minister to oversee the affairs of government. So in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is the chief executive, And then the head of state, like in Britain, is just a ceremonial head of state. And then in the presidential system, the president, like in America, the president is the chief executive and the head of state. So everything is in the president. And so he has a lot of powers. But the whole country in the presidential system is the constituency of the president. But as I said, there are variances like in France and in other places where something a little bit different prevails, and then they have a prime minister and so forth and so on, which, but their president is equally powerful. So it doesn't matter what the system is, as Samego has said. It doesn't matter what the system is. It matters. What matters is the people that are operating it. Samego has made all the whole clarification about the concept. What matters what people that are operating it. Why was it that the First Republic collapsed? The First Republic in Nigeria collapsed because there was also equally corruption. So it is the people that are operating that system that matter. It is the structure that matter. And then if the structure is not properly in place, and then people are not, the electorate cannot control those structures, then the whole system, whether presidential or parliamentary, it will all boil down to the same point. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Tedeke there in our Kaduna Center. Now let's come to Abuja here. Honorable Mongono, coming to you. Now this whole talk about, switching from presidential system of governance to the parliamentary system of governance has raised a lot of concerns, especially coming from the parliament. What are your opening remarks?
Well, as rightly pointed by the two learned gentlemen, the presidential system of government presupposes separation of powers between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, while the parliamentary system of government presupposes fusion of powers. That is, the executive power of the state and the legislative power of the state is vested or domiciled in the parliament. So this is the two distinguishing factor between the presidential system of government and the legislative system of government. Why we are now advocating or pushing for a presidential system of parliamentary system of government is, as rightly also observed by the two previous speakers, is in the presidential system of government, though there is separation of powers between the executive and the legislature to check the excesses of each other. But in a developing society like Nigeria, where we have very weak institutions, too much power is concentrated in the hands of the executive, and therefore is susceptible to abuse and misuse, as evidenced in the shortcomings that we are having in the operation of the presidential system of government now in Nigeria. But in the parliamentary system of government, where we have fusion of powers, that is, both the executive and members of the executive are also come from the parliament. One, there is easy ways and means of conflict resolution, as opposed to the present situation where we have very serious conflict between the executive and the legislature because there is clear-cut separation of powers. Because of the fact that members of the executive are also members of the legislature, it quickens decision-making process. Look at the situation whereby when budget comes to the National Assembly, it takes 6, 4, 5 months to be passed. If it is in the parliamentary system of government where members of the executive are also members of parliament, there is understanding, cross-fertilization of ideas, which will make way for quick passage of the budget. Then the other reason is that the presidential system of government is very, very expensive to operate.
because of the fact that we have the executive arm of government that has ministers with all the retinue of aides of the ministers and what have you, of the president and what have you, that goes along with it, and then the legislature with all the retinue of aides that goes with it. And we are now preaching the gospel of trying to cut the expenditure in governance, especially recurrent expenditure, with a view to deploying the much needed resources to the capital aspect of our budget to drive development. So for a developing economy like Nigeria, it is very, very expensive to sustain the present system with all the overhead that is involved in sustaining such a system. So, and this is also one of the reasons why we are advocating for a parliamentary system of government, so that resources that are now used to sustain this system can be released and then redeployed for the purpose of development.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Mongono. We'll return to you. Let's also now get the views of Honorable Sergius Ogun. You'll listen to the other panelists talk about their concept, understanding of the concept of the parliamentary versus presidential. Let's have your own insight into what the distinguishing features are between the parliamentary and the presidential system of government, and therefore the advantages of one over the other.
Thank you again. I think it's clearly where the power lies. The Honorable Moguno practically took out my thoughts. Maybe that's why we are signatories to this bill. The presidential system of government is too expensive. Nigeria is a poor nation. We cannot afford it. The professor in Kaduna made mention of both system and the collapse of the parliamentary system. I don't think it collapsed. There was a coup. Just like we had a coup in the early 80s, they also sacked the former presidential system of government. So for me, the parliamentary system of government, well, I mean, we are one of the Commonwealth nations. Look at all the other Commonwealth nations. They are practicing parliamentary system of government. Even the ones that have presidential system of government is not the full-blown presidential system as you have in America. So the parliamentary, for us, the signatories to this bill, as it is today in Nigeria, is what we think will rescue Nigeria. Now everybody's talking about, what's the word there now? Restructuring. Now we're going to tinker with some things in the exclusive list and the concurrent list, so that we'll move more things from the exclusive to the concurrent. Then maybe devote power to the states. Like Honorable Moguno said, now you have a prime minister and the council of state, the council of ministers, that are parliamentarians. They were elected like the prime minister. So that takes out having a president that will travel around the whole country campaigning. His constituency would be, for example, President Buhari. All he needs to do in the parliamentary system of government is campaign in Daura constituency. When he wins as the leader of the party, he becomes the prime minister. And then he's going to choose his ministers from amongst the elected House of Rep members. So that saves all the aides and all to avoid duplicating or repeating what my colleague has said. Then the presidency is a total duplication. Complete duplication, which we cannot afford it, we don't need it. Then we also look at the issue of, look at the Electoral Act, Amendment Act that we're talking about. That would have been the product of government in the parliamentary system of government. We will prepare that bill and we'll pass it among ourselves. That bill has been in the works for the past 2 years. And in the last 10 months, it was passed going back and forth within the legislators and the executive. And then somebody says, oh, the Attorney General advised the President not to sign. In a parliamentary system of government, the Attorney General would have been a member of Parliament. So in that case, we will make the decision together for the benefit of our people, not what we are doing today. They are throwing bricks and back and forth. So for me, This is what we should have done years back, but it's not late. I think we should work together, bite the bullet now. I know Nigerians will want the easy way out, but there's nothing that's easy in this world.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Sergius.
Honorable Sergius, by the way, Ruth, also comes from the same senatorial district where you had one very prominent Nigerian, the late Chief Anthony Enahoro, who, before he passed away, was an advocate of a return to the parliamentary system of government. He had moved the motion much earlier in the 50s for Nigeria's self-government, which eventually led to Nigeria's independence. We wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I want to get to Mr. Hamisu now. A lot has been said from our guest here, but, you know, Nigeria and Nigerians have, over time, seen different changes. Now, changing from this presidential system of governance to, you know, parliamentary system of governance, would you say we're ready as a nation? Why wait all these years? Are we ready as a nation?
Well, thank you very much for that question. Let me commend the National Assembly for at least kickstarting the debate around the change they want to see in terms of how Nigeria is structured and governed. These are some of the mistakes we always commit in Nigeria. For instance, during the military, they thought by changing the name of the electoral empire, they could do away with the issues of rigging and what have you. What has come out clearly all over the world is, as people continue to progress in their practices, certain fundamental questions confront how governance is conducted. And that equally call to question the existing structure. But again, as my colleagues in the academia rightly stated, it is not about the structure. It is about the attitude of those that are practicing a given system of government. Don't forget the fact that presidential system of government is being practiced elsewhere in the world, and it is working. The question we should be asking is, why did we jettison parliamentary system of government in the first place? What were the reasons? What are the lessons learned from that? And why did we adopt presidential system of government? And if we have the cause to change, why do we want to change? All the reasons that have been given by the honorable members that are seated here, there are genuine reasons, there are things that we needed to ponder about. But it is not, as I said, let me repeat, it is not about the structure. It is about those that are managing the structure. It is, let me say this with due respect to everybody that is talking about this issue. It is the self-seeking attitude of almost all Nigerians that are called elite. Because if you talk, for instance, if you take the constitution of our parliament from the state to the national, you come to realize that in the name of ethnic balancing or whatever, where you're supposed to have a moderate number of persons that are making laws for the country, you have a large number of persons that are seated in the National Assembly that are making laws for this country. And that accounts for almost the retinues of aides they've already mentioned that are gulping a substantial amount of resources that are needed for development. If you go to the state, it's the same thing. You have each local government producing a representative in an economy that is agrarian in nature, that is not producing anything. Then you go to local government. All of these are duplication. The person that is at the National Assembly is coming from that state. The person at the State House of Assembly is coming from that same state. The person that is seated at the local government council is coming from that same state or local government area. So whether it is parliamentary or not, don't forget the fact that one of the reasons that was adduced for the coup in 1966 was issue of corruption. And then in this very particular presidential system of government, corruption has ballooned. And that, again, is taking resources out of the system, coupled with the large number of people that are governing from the state to the federal to the local government. Now, if you add all of this together, you come to realize that it is not the issue of structure, but there are other factors. As I mentioned, corruption is part of it. Duplication is also part of the entire process. The economy is another thing. Lastly, what I'd like to mention is the ideology that is even that the state espouses. Don't forget the fact that the parliamentary system of government was practiced at a point that the state is championing development, and there was semblance of welfareism, where people are giving houses, you have the public institutions working. For instance, the education system was working. So you don't need much for you to, because public institutions are functioning. And we move away from that, and by the time we embrace presidential system of government, we embrace liberal democracy. And the concept of liberal democracy simply means that the public cannot continue to provide for the people. So market's supposed to provide for the people. And that leads to one thing: everybody became local government unto themselves, which means that you have to provide security for yourself when public institutions continue to collapse, and then education continue to collapse. And as education is collapsing, you have private schools that are coming up, private security guards, private everything. So people began to look for means to augment their income, and that leads to widespread corruption. So these are some of the issues, apart from the structure.
All right, Abdul Rahman Hamis, well, thank you very much there for your comment. Let's return to Professor Sam Ego. Professor Sam Ego, again, still seeking to understand the basis of the parliamentary versus presidential system of government in Nigeria since independence. We all know that the First Republic, after independence, practiced a parliamentary system for just about 5 years. And for the presidential system of government, we have had it now for an aggregate period of 20 years, plus the 4 years and 3 months that we had it in the Second Republic. So what was the motivating factor for the then military government that was midwifing the transition to civil rule from 1976 up until 1978-79 to jettison the parliamentary for the presidential system of government? What was the attraction?
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, it was Alexander Pope who said, "For forms of government, let the fools contend, for what is best administered is best." So the problem is not this debate about whether it is presidential or whether it is parliamentary. You need to take into consideration the unique experiences of country. In this country, we started with a parliamentary system. But the fact that you have a bad political culture, that you have a political class that is irresponsible, led to the collapse of that parliamentary system. There was a stalemate. It was not just a coup. Elections had been held. Zik was the ceremonial president. He had a duty to call on the leader of the NCNC, which won the majority in national parliament, to form the government. And Zik said he did not recognize the outcome of that election, and therefore he would not go ahead, for the new government to be formed. So there was a stalemate. And remember that developments prior to that and after brought the military into the heart of settling quarrel among members of the political class. So it was not just a coup that dropped from the planet. It was a consequence of the inability of the political class to resolve their own issues. As I talk to you today, we still play the same politics. Now, the Honorable Mongono made a very brilliant point. But let me ask him, how come that the party that controls the executive and also has majority in parliament cannot quickly pass a bill? So there is a problem, there's a crisis with the party system. If you have a party that is a party of policy and is a platform that can really provide governance, it is very easy to govern. So you are dealing, it is not a problem of the distinction between parliament and executive. What you are witnessing is the paralysis of the party system. Secondly, when you have a majoritarian system of a majoritarian electoral system where the winner takes all, you are not going to make it right. So what you find is this kind of unbridled competition. And the person or the party that wins wants to take everything. So you need to go back, to also tinker with your electoral system. And my final point is that what really matters, you need to govern. And to govern, it is not structure that governs. It is, and when you say institutions are weak, institutions are built. Institutions don't spring from another planet and become strong. Leaders that have a vision of the future devote attention to build institutions. But when you are grandstanding, when it is the way politicians talk, you think you wake up tomorrow, you won't see this country. I think we need to also go back to politics of accommodation. If you don't have politics of accommodation, if you don't have a strong party system, go back to parliamentary, you produce the same results.
Professor Samego, thank you very much. Ruth, I think it's important to also get a take of Professor Moses Ted Heke. Professor Ted Heke, I'm sure you listen to your brother professor talk about the paralysis of the First Republic. And some persons would also raise the point, and I would like you to address this. In other systems of government, take India, for instance, you have stalemate from time to time. And the military has never stepped into their politics, different from Pakistan in any case. And the argument, therefore, is if the military were not hasty in 1966, perhaps the parliamentary system would have endured. Perhaps the political culture, which Professor Sambegu very brilliantly articulated, might have grown. And so the parliamentary system of government might still have been with us. But regardless, what are your thoughts and what was the justification in 1978-79 for jettisoning the parliamentary in place of a presidential system of government?
There are a lot of factors that are responsible for the jettisoning of the parliamentary system in 1966. Some of the factors are what my external examiner in the university when I did my PhD, and also Samego, and also I think he has played a lot of role in my life. So he has made a lot of contribution to me and then to my understanding of issues. One of the problems that we are having is that the elements of democracy, we don't even have it. The element of democracy that led to the emergence of the liberal democracy is not here, completely absent in Nigeria. If you read C.B. Macpherson, he talked about three forms of democracy. One is the liberal democracy, one is the socialist democracy, and the other one is the African democracy. The African democracy is where people go into a common place and then argue and then make it as a point of cohesion and then come to the same point. And then when they come to the same point in their argumentation in the village square, they put up good reasons for their policy and everything in our village environment. It still happens today. That's the African democracy. And then the socialist democracy is the one that they practice in China and in former Russia, which were advocating socialism. And then it was an integration of both capitalism. So the people misunderstand some of these issues. Socialism is a transition period. It's in the process of integration of capitalism and communism. And then in the process of whittling down the capitalist greed, which we are not prepared to do here. And that is the problem. And that is what China has successfully applied. So, and then there's the liberal democracy. The liberal democracy is a product of the economic structure, liberal economy. That is, the economy was the first to be liberalized. And then the politics now, because of the impact of the economy on politics now became liberalized. So now, if you don't take these two into consideration, if you don't take these two aspects into consideration in your liberal democracy, you are into trouble. And like, if we want to do real liberal democracy in Nigeria, we must have to transform the economy. And then that is what I've been advocating in several places, which we have not been doing. I am an Urobo man, and Urobo people are not good in the real sense of the word for economic transformation. And then it is the same thing with all the rest of us who are there in Nigeria. But we have gotten an inkling of how other people did their own of economic transformation, which is the key to liberal democracy, and which is from Onitsha. I've been saying this, Onitsha industrial area, Nnewi industrial area, like Indosi Moto, which I've been talking about from place to place, that we must have to strengthen them. If we don't strengthen them, we are nowhere. To Ozobolo and then to Aba, that we have our potential African industrial base. Now people are now developing flying cars. We are here, according to what Julius Nyerere said, that when people are going to the moon, we are going to the farm, taking our hoe and cutlasses, and then we are not prepared to develop the economy. It is the economy that will now make the bourgeoisie not to be greedy. In Nigeria, according to Professor Claude Ake, the economy, because the economy is the only means through which the bourgeoisie go into accumulation, primitive accumulation of capital. And that is why it becomes a do-or-die affair. You know, you heard when Obasanjo said that it was a do-or-die affair. And then it is the same thing that is causing all this problem that we're having. So it is what led to the crisis of the First Republic. It has now led to the crisis of this presidential system. So whichever way you look at it, whether presidential or parliamentary, if you don't go and then do the needy things that are needed to transform this society, so that you now create a real economic class, an economic class that is prepared to represent the interests of Nigeria, that is prepared to compete with their peers in Europe and North America, like that the Chinese are now competing. You cannot have a real democracy. You will be having all this change of gas, people advocating for this or advocating for that, which is not necessary. What is necessary is that we have to transform our industrial base. If we don't transform our industrial base, transform our universities, our primary schools must be transformed to a primary school that is oriented towards science and technology and towards critical arts. And then our secondary school, the same thing. Our university, the same thing. This is not done. I have written a paper which is going to be published about the crisis of our educational system. In fact, that is why our university cannot perform. And that is the crisis we are facing. And then without resolving this crisis of how all these universities and schools cannot perform, we cannot do anything about even liberal democracy. We'll be fighting ourselves every day because there will be no economic base that can give economic succor to the bourgeoisie to accumulate. They will always be going on primitive accumulation of capital. And it is the primitive accumulation of capital, the struggle for power, and selfish interest.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Tedeke, there in our Kaduna Network Center. Let's come back to Abuja now. Honorable Mongono, from what Professor Tedeke is saying, you know, it will add a lot. I'm talking about the value in terms of economic value when this is being practiced, talking about parliamentary system of governance. But if we recall, in the First Republic, when this system of governance was practiced, we had just 3 to 4 regions. And now we have 36 states plus the FCT. Now, how would this operate in terms of cutting costs, you know, in governance, parliamentary system of governance?
You know, in parliamentary system of governance, as I earlier on said, it's about, one, reducing the actors in the system, and also reducing the arms of government. For example, as I said earlier on, in a parliamentary system of government, there is fusion of powers. That is, the legislature and the executive combined together, both at the national and at the state level, including the local government level. So there is reduction in the cost of governance in the sense that since there is fusion of powers, you don't need to have a separate arm of government with all the personalities that are involved and all the offices that go along with it, which needs a lot of money to sustain. For example, in the presidential system of government, apart from the legislature, we have the president with the ministers and advisors, senior special assistants, and what have you. There is a lot of cost added to the issue of governance. So when you go to the state also, mutatis mutandis, what applies in the national level also applies to the state level. So by extension and implication, it means there is reduction in the cost of governance.
All right, Honorable Mogono, thank you very much. Honorable Sergius Ogun, now let's still pursue the line of the argument, which we have heard from the National Assembly, from the House of Reps in particular, that countries that practice the parliamentary system of government would appear to post much more consistent indices in terms of their growth and development versus presidential system. In other words, if you take out the cost factor, then you have others. But some persons would also argue that merely reducing the cost of governance is not a substitute for sound economic policy enunciation and implementation. So what then is the economic imperative in a parliamentary system of government that trumps it over the presidential system of administration?
Thank you. Well, I mentioned earlier on about the president in the presidential system of government, or rather in parliamentary system of government, being the prime minister, just having a constituency to campaign in. I think that is lost on us. I think we should go back there, because that's the genesis of what we go through in this system we are practicing today. You have, someone once told me that, okay, well, this is a life example. The president said he had contested like 3 times before, and all the systems worked against him. But a friend of mine, a colleague of mine today told me, in the past, the president will come to Jos, will come with 3, 4, 5 jeeps. They will wait for him at the point of entering the state. And then when he gets there, he brings out his hand and they all cheer and then they go in. But this last one, he came with a private jet, and there were like more than 7 jets at the airport that came with him, and there were jeeps everywhere. And then they knew he was going to get it this time. But this is a retired general that we know he's not corrupt, or we claim he's not corrupt. So the point I'm making here, the money bags came out to say, you are the man that can win this election for us. Then they pump the money in. Is he not going to pay back? If he doesn't pay back in cash, he's going to look the other way. Same thing with governorship. Today, you cannot tell me that somebody can come out and says he has over 50 billion to contest a governorship election. There will be godfathers that will put him there. And the minute he gets in there, he will have to pay back.
State capture.
So the point we are making is, if we eliminate that, we're going to go a long way. Just eliminate that for a start. They will begin to walk on the path of, what's the word now? We'll begin to avoid some of the costs that are either we have inherited or have been put on us. So for me, we have to make sacrifices. Yeah, well, I didn't want to say this on this program. People complain so much about the Senate, but in this system, we might not have Senate. You're not looking at that, because bicameral system of government, as much as it's good to balance basically the legislation and thoughts, but it's also very expensive. We have to know that we are not a rich nation. We deceive ourselves so much. We are not a rich nation. Look at the security forces, the policemen. How much is a policeman paid? Like the presidential debate, when the vice presidential candidate for PDP broke it down to the health care, to security. So it became very obvious that the police cannot function without taking money from ordinary people on the street. Same thing with health care. The hospitals cannot function. They cannot buy diesel, because we are talking about how much is budgeted for a patient. Less than, is it 5 kobo? Same thing for a police station. You know, less than how much is budgeted for every police station. So how are they going to function? The government looks the other way. It says, okay, get your money. So what we are saying here is, this system is too expensive. We have the best brains in the world, but let's have a system we can manage. We can all call our own, and then avoid the duplications. Look at the parliamentary system under the 60, what's it called now? Before it was truncated. Look at the western region. Yeah, we had the first television station in Africa before Spain and other countries, because there was competition. Like Professor Tommy would say those days in Lagos Business School. Then I think the Eastern Premier said, okay, the Western television station was the first of, you will know this better than me, Kingsley, first of its kind or something. Then the man in the East said is second to none. There was rivalry that allowed for people to bring in ideas and all. But today we have a fidibottle federalism where all the state governors sit down at the end of the month, they come and take money from the federal. If you and I don't have to work to earn money, will you have any need to wake up this morning to wear your shoes to come here? But that's what we are practicing. And we say it's okay. Besides the fact that we have the human beings will be a factor in this, but the system is flawed. And we need to go back to that foundation.
All right. Thank you very much, Honorable Sergius. Now, to you, Hamisu, Mr. Hamisu, from what they have all said, they've all buttressed the points of the advantages of this proposed bill. Talking about the inequality of income when it comes to the presidential system to the parliamentary when passed. Now, in terms of its stability and governance, if we're measuring growth and development, what are the benefits for us in Nigeria?
Well, I want to make this very clear. Reducing costs via parliamentary system of government is not all that there is to reducing cost in government in Nigeria. You remember Mr. Kingsley made mention of issues of sound economic policies. It's not about policies in this country. Nigeria had enunciated a lot of policies that, if followed and implemented to the latter, with all the good governance that it takes to do that, I think Nigeria should be ahead of countries like Singapore that we are trying to catch up with. Well, it is good to reduce cost of governance, and even with the present arrangement, we can still reduce the cost of governance. The point I'm making is this. Until the ruling class in Nigeria subordinate their own interest to public interest. I'm saying this because I remember what happened when we returned to democracy in 1999. The question of what's supposed to be the package for legislators became a question for debate. And I think the initial arrangement was that revenue mobilization was supposed to fix their emolument and what they needed to earn. And because the parliamentarians have this power that they can exert, they sat and they upped everything that they needed to take home, from accommodation to wardrobe allowance to furniture to everything. Now, if you take that, for instance, like the issue we're discussing here, the critical thing that has come out is abuse of power, where people choose to abuse power for their own interest or those that are close to them. This is what we are witnessing. Let us not lose let us not lose sight of the fact that in the 60s we do not have anti-graft agency. Like the edifice we are seeing today for EFCC, it shows the level of our debasement as a nation, our level of degeneration in terms of stealing public assets. These are monies that are supposed to go into funding critical infrastructure that's supposed to assist the people. So if we want to really talk about governance and how to reposition government in this country, the first thing we needed to do, in addition to, whether call it any system of government, once public officers will not subordinate their interests to the interests of the public, what we have will be fight all over the place. And whether we call it unitary system, or we call it parliamentary, or presidential, or whatever, once interest is at stake, whatever that is going to happen will be based on interest, not based on the interests of the nation, the interests of the people, and what the nation is supposed to benefit. So our action will be dictated by what is in there for me. And that is why when you give people a position of authority as a trust, we abuse the process. The police is given gun to protect the citizen and is using the gun to extract money. We are given ID card in our offices to work, and we are using that ID card to access public funds and to equally extort the people we needed to work for. So in addition to the structure, we must talk about the practices that used to take place within those structures as part of the reasons why we are where we are. So it's not a question of whether we switch to parliamentary or we switch to presidential. Though the parliamentary system, because of the ministerial responsibility and accountability, the issue of accountability is always key. But there must be will to enforce that. Just the way we have impeachment, and we're not using it at the federal level, we're not using it at the state level, we're not using it at the local government level. So even if you bring all the mechanisms, once we don't do it because our interest is at stake, we will not move anywhere.
Amisu, thank you very much. I'm sure some of our viewers will disagree with you. I mean, we have seen impeachment being used almost flagrantly at the state level. And in 2002, President Obasanjo, as he then was, faced the threat of impeachment under the Instant Republic. So but other points that you have made are noted. I would like to return to Professor Sam Ego. Professor Sam Ego, can we try to join the dots? Let's make a connection amongst the dots. We've talked about the system of government, which is parliamentary versus presidential, and some of its essential features. Unfortunately, we've not had time to drill down into some of those details, but I've mentioned some of them so that you can also take them along. We've also talked about the system of election, and, you know, part of which Honorable Sergius was talking about just now has been a cost factor in our democratic practice, liberal democracy as we all know it, which also, some would argue, leads to state capture and therefore an escalation of the level of corruption and invariably poverty in the country, which Abisu was referring to. Can we link all of this, system of government, system of election, and the call for restructuring and invariably amendments to the Constitution?
Thank you very much. I have a lot of respect for our institutions, particularly the parliament, and the fact that consistently you have pro-reform elements in the assembly, you know, gives me a lot of joy. So this bill, for example, is a product of that, and we need to celebrate that. But let us also be clear, because this debate is a process of political education, you know, to all of us. You see, when the House of Rep came up, lifted data, and said that many successful countries, in terms of economic indices, are parliamentary, that is not very correct. That kind of extrapolation is very misleading. You need to understand what produces development outcome. It's not the structure of government. It is, you set sound economic policies. There are many countries where nationalism is very important in the way they develop their plans. Here you have a country, everything is imported, banana, oranges, there are no local industries, the textiles are gone, you know, and you are not doing development. You are not creating jobs. It is not parliamentary system that creates jobs. It is governance. It is the people that are in power that produce jobs. Secondly, the Honorable here made mention of healthy competition in the First Republic. That was not because of parliamentary system. It was the product of the federal arrangement at that time. And federalism can coexist peacefully with both parliamentary and presidential system. So to then again go to that type of analysis is not very helpful, because we want to understand what we are saying. So my point, therefore, is that what matters for every country is that you do governance. You first of all agree as an elite to concede something to the people. And that's exactly what the Asian Tigers have done. To say, look, what is there for the people? You then, that determines how you plan, and then you get correct development outcome. So it is not this data that they are lifting and therefore using it for analysis. It's not very correct, it's misleading. Go back, what produces, you know, this economic, this is not the system of government. You know, and I think we need to be very clear. And I think it's also not correct to say that by fusing executive and legislative powers, you are reducing branches of government. It's not true. The executive remains. The judiciary remains. The legislature remains. And the executive is not just the prime minister or the president. The executive constitutes of the bureaucracy, the police, the army, and so on. So when you say by so doing you reduce cost of governance automatically, and for God's sake, when a governor appoints 50 special advisors, it is not because it is presidential. It is the Nigerian coloration to how we use power. There is nothing in that structure that compels a president to have the number of advisors. It is precisely because the state itself is an industry, and it is part of the patronage system. So if you don't dismantle patronage system that fuels all this, and you go parliamentary, you are still back to square one.
All right, Professor Samego, thanks. Just before we take reactions from our viewers that have come in by way of tweets, let's go to Professor Moses Tedeke. Professor Tedeke, very briefly, is it possible that on account of the fluctuation of time, we are probably not now taking into consideration that the escalating cost of governance on account, again, of the number of administrative units that we have to deal with? This is an inheritance of military rule. My colleague Ruth was talking about the First Republic. Before 1963, August, there was only 3 regions. After the creation of the Midwest, by way of a plebiscite, it became 4. And then the military made it 12. Eventually, it became 19. 19 became 21. 21 became 30. 30 became 36. All of this have tended to escalate the cost of governance, some would argue. Is there any sense in which a parliamentary system, under the prevailing constitutional arrangements, might help reduce the cost if there is no, in addition, consequential reduction in the administrative units of the country?
Very much. I am very happy that we are discussing these issues, because one of the things that my parliamentarians are saying there is just simplification of facts. In the First Republic, we had also senators, and then we had houses of chiefs in the states. As we are talking now, we have no houses of chiefs in the states. But even without houses of chiefs in the states, we have escalated cost of governance. This, I'm not happy with our legislators, that they don't even go into history to understand history, to see what has gone wrong with our people. And then we have stated it here point blank and clear, that the economic system as it's been operated is the problem. And it is not because it's parliamentary or no parliamentary. And so without creating a productive economic system that is germane to liberal democracy, that you limit our economic system to only, as Nyerere said, when people are going to the moon, we are taking our hoe to the farm, and then that is where our intelligence stops. And then we are saying that structures of the government expenses in government is this and that, and then we are not mindful of the fact that we are debating defeatism. That's defeatism. The parliamentarians have handed us self-defeatism. That is because they have not legislated on anything that is structurally transformative. And that is why we are now saying that even to my wife's kitchen, that we should create states. We are not saying that to my wife's kitchen we should do this and that. And then so that I can be independent, so that I can now be administering my wife's kitchen. And that's exactly what we are doing. It's self-defeatism. Was that what the Japanese did? Was that what the Chinese are doing now, even under our nose? Is that what the Asians are doing? Is that what the Singaporeans are doing? Is that what the South Koreans are doing? Was that what America did? Was that what Britain did? So it is, without transforming the economy, you can't have democracy. That is the truth. And that is the problem. That is the biggest problem that Nigeria has. We just divide oil money from foreign oil companies. And then we say we are a giant of Africa, this and that. I always say it in the class and everywhere that we are not a giant. We are a giant with clay feet. And then with this, I put a period to it that we have not started anything about democracy, despite everything, whether we made institution or not. If the people occupying there are corrupt, they are not prepared, they are only prepared to feather their nest. They are not prepared to transform the society so that they can become great. I talked to one or two persons. Now, if you become a billionaire and your people are poverty-stricken like Nigeria, do you think you are going to be respected at the United Nations? No. And that is the truth. It is because your economy is strong and powerful. And that is why you have the respect. So the National Assembly must have to wake up. And that is the truth. The two members there, I think they have disappointed me terribly. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Tedeke. Well, you will reply him, Honorable Mongono. But first of all, let's take some tweets.
Ruth, now, why the matter is still hot, and before we take the tweets, we'll give the two honorable members the opportunity to respond very briefly. Honorable members of the House of Reps, your thoughts with regard to what Professor Kadeke had said. And by the way, he was talking about creating states to the kitchen. Happily, he didn't mention the other room. So,
okay. And just to add to what Kingsley is saying, what synergy will this create for the arms of government?
No, let him give his direct response to that.
I think, with all due respect to the learned professor from your Kaduna studio, he's emphasizing sound economic policies that will drive production in a society. What he failed to understand is that driving sound economic policies and formulating sound economic policies is a function of laws that are being enacted by the legislature. As I said earlier on, in a situation where we have conflict, serious conflict between the executive and the legislature that tends to constitute a cog in the wheel of passage of the necessary legislations that are supposed to drive the economy, to create the productive base of the economy. The system is faulty. And that is the main reasoning behind the advocacy for a parliamentary system of government that presupposes fusion of powers with all the attendant and concomitant advantage of one, quickening the passage of laws, quickening decision-making process, and then also reducing conflict. So it is the inability of the government as constituted by the executive and the legislature to function properly that brought about this issue of the comparador bourgeoisie that he's talking about that have become parasitic to the society.
All right, Honorable Maguno, thank you very much. Honorable Sergio Sogon, let's have your take with terms of your rejoinder to what Professor Tedeke said.
I think the academians do not seem to believe. You haven't said anything about the cost of the presidential, electing the president and the governor. I thought you would have responded to that. But in any case, in the UK, for example, if your child doesn't go to school or child cannot pay school, there's even no school fees for the elementary. For the university, tertiary, you get grants. Same thing in the US. So I'm talking about the academians now. We, by way of laws, are changing this. I had a bill that passed second reading on Thursday to say children and wards of public servants should do their tertiary education here in Nigeria. I also had a bill that passed second reading some time back that says that public officials should not go overseas for medical checkup or treatment. All this, we are trying to make sure that we domicile these things here, correct these things by law, way of law. Because you mentioned something about the National Assembly members, any XY amount of money and all that. My take always is, is the system. Where I'm going in this direction is, we expect that things will change. We expect that you will fix the economy overnight. But the foundation is not right, like Honorable Muguno said. When we are fighting for how to take projects to our constituency, where is the direction given to lawmaking? And I'm not saying the parliamentary system will cure this. I'm saying by way of laws, we can change so many things in this country. Don't expect the economy to change overnight. It cannot change overnight when the foundation is not right. Now, what's about recurrence? Recurrence is about 60-something% every year, every budget. Then how can you not develop with less than 20-something% in capital? And we say we are giants of Africa. So, again, I go back to the fact that we just expect that things will change without taking steps for it to change. It's never going to change.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Sergio Ogun. Let's now take our viewers' comments that have come in by way of tweets using our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. Ibrahim Tudu. Our main and master problem, he writes, in Nigeria today is, in my opinion, the capacity, patriotism, and running costs of the legislature. If the parliamentary system of government will be different and solve our problems, so be it.
And Dr. Babagana Mohammed, this discussion is very good for Nigeria, as it would allow us to take stock of things holistically. Well done, NTA GMN, for the initiative, and kudos to all, especially Honorable Mohammed Tahir Mongono, for the honest analysis.
And Ibrahim Modu Aji tweets, says the call to return to parliamentary system of government at this time is diversionary from the rising call to restructure the country. The presidential system is okay, going by Nigeria's population and its resources.
And from Suleiman Sanusi, either it is parliamentary or presidential system of government we practice in Nigeria today, the status quo remains the same. It will still going to be the government of the elites and for the elites and by the elites. And nothing will change that unless we change our mindsets by the realities on ground.
Now, this is from the handle, I am Chris. It says the presidential system is expensive compared to the parliamentary system. I think it doesn't change anything except our attitude to government and governance changes.
And from Sunny Michael, I have noticed that parliamentary system is dominant in Europe and a law can be easily passed. On this note, if we put politics aside and run the system as it should be, parliamentary system will favor us than the present presidential that is expensive to run.
Mokhtar said, does it mean that the parliamentary system of government is free from disagreement amongst members? I think the problem is us as a people.
And from Baba Isha Kazana, just like the Dons rightly said, it is not the system but the caliber of people that matters. With the kind of legislatures we are having now, most of whom are bench warmers who find themselves in the parliament through dubious means, we are not ready for it.
Unfortunately, we cannot go along with that. Parliamentarians are elected duly and given the certificates of return by the electoral umpire, that's the Independent National Electoral Commission. Obinale William tweets, a semi-collegiate presidential system with a 6-man presidential council and a modified lower house made up of speakers, minority and majority leaders of the State House of Assembly. This will combine the Swiss, French and Canadian models with traditional rulers and organs from 6 zones playing a role. I'm not sure I understand what he's talking about.
And from Pastor Arise Monday, considering the cost and abuse of power in our present presidential system of government, parliamentary would be the best for Nigeria.
Bala Muhammad Gaidam, nothing is wrong with the system of government in Nigeria that we are operating. Now, it's about the people managing the system. The political attitude and the culture is just not helpful. Whatever the system will adopt will actually end up like this.
And from Mohammed Dokochi, parliamentary or presidential system, neither here nor there. Our major problem is the political class. God save this country.
Mohammed Ajia tweets, our problem is neither presidential nor parliamentary as a system of government. Even a monarchy can work if those in authority are godly, sincere and upright. What we have in Nigeria is to have a cocktail of selfish politicians who are now holding the system to ransom.
And from Ayobami Adebowale, I'm sure Professor Sam Egu spoke out the mind of majority of Nigerians. 99% of our politicians don't have ideology. Any slight chance that their personal expectations aren't met, they cross carpets even if we practice heavenly system of government. Nigerian politicians will mess it up. Well,
all right, those are the tweets that we can take. And just to get the closing thoughts of Hamisu and Professor Sam Egu, underlying all of this is the fact that the country is having economic challenges, population is pressing 200 million, and everybody wants, a much better life than we've had, in the past couple of decades. What is it that can be done on the political side of things, whether restructuring or a reversion to the parliamentary system of government? Hamisu.
Well, I've said it earlier on, is the subordination of our individual private interests to public interests, so that whatever institution we're occupying, the overriding need to deliver service to the people will become the guiding principle, so that the needed reforms that we needed to bring will not be driven by our interests, but for the country and for the people of the country.
Thank you. Professor Sambedu.
I like restructuring. I like reducing the power of the center. But that alone will not solve the problem. There has to be governance. There has to be accountability of public officials. You need citizens to participate and hold their elected people accountable at all levels. And this can happen whether in a presidential or parliamentary system. So governance for me is a driving factor. And yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Sam Egu. And yes, that's it for the discussion today. Thank you so much, all our guests. But let's start by thanking Professor Moses Tedeke in our Kaduna Network Center. He's a professor of political science and political economy, Department of Political Science and Defense Studies, Nigerian Defense Academy, Kaduna. Thank you very much, sir, for your contributions on the program this morning. And here in our Abuja studios, we had Honorable Mohammed Tahir Mongono. He's the Chairman, House Committee on Agric and Rural Development. Thank you very much for coming. Also, Honorable Sergius Ose Ogun, representing Esan Northeast, Southeast of Edo State. Thank you so much for joining us. And Abdurrahman Abu, I beg your pardon, Hamisu, researcher and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights. And now to sports. Team NTA book final place of the Swan Cup after they record a second win against Team ITV, and Manchester United sack Mohiro after 2.5 years in charge as manager. Let's now join our sports desk for details.